LA one. And I think it was a couple years ago they had one where, for some reason, the NCIS was called to this guy who had died. He's like 85 years old, and there's two, stout Marines there, and you can tell from the Marines' attitude, they're annoyed that they were called for this 85-year-old homeless man to come there. And they're annoyed, and then at one point, one of the other homeless guys takes his shirt and pulls back like his tie, and there's I think it was a Congressional Medal of Honor for his fight in Iwo Jima. And the part I liked is that suddenly these kind of slacking Marines, they came to attention because they knew exactly what that medal meant, and they honored the guy. They knew what it symbolized as self-sacrifice. Or a couple years ago, I had a great wedding where this couple got married, and I was meeting with them, and he said, so I always ask the question, well, how'd you guys meet? And they had said that they were both Marines. She was a Marine, and he was a Marine, so I said, oh, you met in the Marines. And she said, no, we met at BSU. And I said, oh. And I said, well, you're both Marines? Yes. And she says, what? I was in the Marines, I got out of the Marines, and then he breaks in and says that, and I don't remember what it is, but he says proudly that she won this high medal in the Marines for valor and bravery. And so I said, oh, well, what happened? She was in some convoy, and the convoy goes under attack. They're overwhelmed. A couple of the other Marines are shot, and she heads into the gunfire, and drags them back. Doesn't get shot, but she drug them back, and she got this medal for bravery. And I said, holy cow, you're kidding. She says, no. She says, wasn't that big a deal. I figured I'd die anyhow, and I wasn't going to have them die alone, so I went after them. It's not really a big deal. I think it's a big deal. That's incredible. So I said, oh, so you met at BSU because you're both Marines? And she said, no. And she said, I was in this class, and I come into this class, and there's one seat left, and it's next to him. And he's grinning at this point. And she says, I looked at him, and I thought, oh, no, he's a Marine. And so at that point, I'm really curious. I said, wait a minute, you could tell just by looking at him he was a Marine? And she says, yeah, you can tell. Well, I want that superpower. So I was like, well, what gave it away? And she said, oh, you could just tell. And I said, no, really, I want to know, how can you just look at somebody and say, you're a Marine? And she says, well, Father, you're not going to ask me to really tell you, are you? I said, yes, I really want to know. So then she says, I'll tell you why. Because Marines are, and I can't tell you the next word. And I said, so I thought that was hilarious. And he's just smiling. And he says, you have to understand, Marines, they're kind of arrogant. They're up for a challenge, and I could just tell he was a Marine. So I sat down, and he turns and smiles at me, and she says, no. She says, first of all, I know you're Marine. I do not want to date you, so you can stop trying to smile at me. But then this is the funny part. So over the class, they became friends, and then they'd studied together. And then she said, and wouldn't you know, I fell in love with a Marine. Which I think it's funny, but I think also the funny part, I said, so it was meant to be. And she's, yeah, now for the rest of our marriage, we'll always have this competition. And I loved him because he was just smiling. He looked like the lion that caught the gazelle and ate it. I mean, he was, and anyhow, so I thought she was amazing. Won this medal. But then the day of the wedding, I was going to tell that story because I'm proud of her, that she won this medal for heading straight into fire to save other people. And so just before we processed in, she says, oh, Father, you're not going to tell the story about the medal, are you? And I said, well, yeah, I wanted to. And she says, don't do that. This day is not about me. This day is about us and our commitment. Do not tell that story. Isn't that amazing? I liked her before. Now I love her. And then she was coming to the parish. She was pregnant and then was coming to daily mass. And I was really hoping that the kid would go to St. Ignatius, but they moved. Because somebody like that, who is so humble and brave, she understands the power of self-sacrifice. Really, both of them do. I just kind of thought, wow, that would make our school even better for two people who really did believe in self-sacrifice. And their reading was so perfect, because the first reading was an Adam and Eve story. And I'm just telling all you this because the cross is also kind of like a medal in one way. It symbolizes that you understand self-sacrificing love. And the Adam and Eve story just is this. The doorway into love is the cross. That's a meeting. I know that sounds kind of strange, but remember the story. Adam, and his name is Adam, Ha-Adam, the earthling. That's what God calls him, the earthling. And the earthling, and this is key, says a prayer and prays for a Savior. And then what happens is that you hear the rib bone, but you could translate it, took a rib, or you can translate it, because it's the same Hebrew, that God cut his side, that he died and his side was split, is actually how you'd have to translate it. And then he awakes and he sees Eve. And then human, community is born. Then you have a couple. Human community is born when people know self-sacrificing love. And before, God would just call them the earthlings. After you know love to the point of death, that's when God calls them human beings. So the definition of a human being is somebody who can practice self-sacrificing love. That gives birth to community. And so the reason why Christ's side is split on the cross, his heart is opened, is because we were true community, not just two couples, but true community is born from the side of Christ. It's an Adam and Eve story, that Christ, his self-sacrificing love, gave birth to the church, true community. And that's how our humanity is born. So what I really love is that the first prayer in the Bible for a Savior is Adam, and you think the prayer is answered with Eve. It's not. That prayer for a Savior is actually answered with Christ, who also has his side open, and the church is born. So for us, the cross, it symbolizes, really, the way of love. How to become a true human being is to accept the way of the cross. Just one more, because I love this. The cross is also the gateway into heaven. I know that sounds kind of strange, but as a gateway of heaven, how do you get into heaven? Do you get into heaven because, Joe, you've been a good little boy your entire life and you obeyed all the rules? That doesn't get you into heaven. That just makes you a well-ordered person. How you get into heaven is actually through the cross. The cross is the door into heaven, true community. That's why in the book of Revelation, when John sees heaven, he just doesn't see heaven. He has to go through Christ. And Christ has his sword sticking out and flames in his eyes. Christ is the door into heaven. But the reason why the sword and the flame, it symbolizes self-sacrificing love. The cross symbolizes self-sacrificing love. And how do you get into heaven? It's not because you've been a good little boy. It's because you understand self-sacrificing love, which always does kind of amaze me, because that means there's more people who understand the theology of the cross than are just Catholic. And there are some Catholics who might be wearing the cross around their neck, but they've never practiced self-sacrificing love. And so for those who are entering the church, before you consider following Christ or even falling in love and becoming Catholic, you have to picture yourself on the cross. That's the door into heaven. Just one more. The cross is also the symbol of freedom. Think about the Marine, the woman, who heads straight into gunfire for other people. She also symbolizes a true, free person. She wasn't thinking about herself. She wasn't concerned. She actually thought she would die anyhow. But she wasn't going to have people die alone. So without fear, without concern for herself, she was more concerned about other people. that's a symbol of freedom. And so the cross for us means that's a place that we've died to our ego, our selfishness, where we just have to think about ourselves. The cross symbolizes we've died to all of that. So truly we can live free and in love. That's why St. Paul says, the only thing I preach is Christ crucified. If we can die to our ego and selfishness and hatred, everything else is love. And so, I know this sounds strange. Like a lot of people can talk about theology, but unless they pick up the cross and really can embrace it, all it is a bunch of talk. It's not much. So for us, the cross is the door into true love, the door into becoming a human being. The cross is the door into heaven, the door into the church. It's a door of our freedom. And so the same way, going back to that NCI show, when the Marines, they saw that medal and they came to attention. We're about to kind of play the same thing with the veneration of the cross. We bow to the thing that really is a symbol of love and self-sacrifice and freedom. We're the ones who follow the way of the cross. And so what we honor tonight is that we know where the true door is, and it's the cross. And so together, let us stand and offer our prayers.